And start recording now. Perfect. All right. So basically for this session, we're just going to talk a little bit about what Scorch is and kind of what the plan is for these next kind of 8 weeks worth of doing sessions. So a little bit more about what Shulk Ignite is, an overview of the program, some information about contacting us, as well as some information about the gala and getting your coding environment all set up, essentially. So for anybody who's new to Shulk Ignite in general, we are basically a student-run club at the University of Calgary, and we run sessions to help inspire kids and people who are older to have a sort of a passion for programming. So we want to try to ignite a passion for programming around people and try and get them to be able to enjoy programming the same way that we do and be able to do all the same stuff that we like to do. And so for this session's focused on web development. So generally speaking, what we're looking for is we want to be able to have you guys be able to create a website from scratch or from a template, and then be able to take it all the way up to being actually available on the web. Understanding kind of what's happening in your browser, being able to understand the different pieces that are running whenever you're on a web page and understand what's actually happening. Get an idea of kind of what industry practices are. So not just, be able to do this and kind of hodgepodge it together and have, duct tape kind of holding together your whole system, but actually be able to do it in a way that makes you confident about being able to put up websites easily. And give you an idea of kind of where these skills transfer across, because a lot of the web development skills you're going to learn are going to be actually handy for tons of other stuff. Like there's a surprising amount of things that now use a lot of web technologies in them, and those skills can be transferred across multiple places. And so a big part of that that we kind of encourage whenever we're doing any of our sessions is that we make sure that everything is trying to be as real world as possible. And so what that means is, we're not going to try to give you kind of like boring assignments to do where it's just like, fill in this thing, fill in this thing. We're going to try and make sure that it's as real world as possible. So things like being able to build out websites that are based off of real world contracts that I've previously done or anybody else has previously done. As well as being able to build websites on various topics. So you're not just limited to one sort of topic that you're building websites for, but also just understanding how to build websites in general and how they change based on what the content that you're trying to do is. Kind of cover some theory about how things work. So a little bit about how things run under the hood, how lots of companies that currently run, what they do, and give you everything that you need to keep going. One of the big things with Scorch as well is that we want to give you the tools to be able to explore different aspects of web development in various different ways. Lots of programming in general, the kind of stuff that you might be used to with the first couple of sessions that we've done is very much like, here's kind of the things that we're going to do. Web development goes off and branches in a ton of different directions. And so with that, we want to set you up to allow you to go and explore those different branches as much as you want. And so that kind of leads us to the question of why even bother? Like, why actually bother taking these sessions, and why actually bother trying to learn any web development anyways? So as I said before, web development skills, they transfer across a lot actually. So they're not just used in websites. So car dashboards. So whenever you go onto a car and or like a Tesla, for example, and you have like the big dashboard screen, it has all the buttons and stuff that you can click on it. That usually is all done with the same technologies that you'd find that we're going to learn about in these sessions. Likewise, operating systems, so like Windows, Mac OS, Linux, anything that you're running currently to actually view these sessions on, all of those, a lot of the windows and the way they operate is all based on the same technologies that we're going to be using for web development as well. Same thing with mobile apps, printers, game UI, a whole bunch of different things are all based off the exact same skills you're going to learn here and will be transferable directly across from web development into those skills. There's a lot of practicality as well and creativity. So there's tons of jobs in web development. There's so many jobs in web development or things that are adjacent to web development. So you're setting yourself up really well for the future. They're also really easy and free to distribute for any of the apps that you build. So if you're used to doing some of our other sessions, we have like Pygame. People have to actually have Pygame installed. You have to like send them the files. They've got to run them. They got to do whatever. Websites, you send somebody a URL, you're good to go. Really easy to get up there and distribute, and oftentimes really cheap or free to distribute them across the board. Whereas with things like apps, you might have to pay for an app store or any of that sort of stuff. As far as like the creativity goes, there's tons of things that are already pre-built for you, as well as like a lot of options for you to explore different ways of doing things. So there's lots of opportunity for you to do new things, and there's a lot less limits of programming than there is something like Python, because not everybody will have everything set up the same way. So with the web, everybody has a browser. You can just kind of go at it, have a lot of fun with building whatever you want. And that's really what we want to inspire is you guys to go off and go build stuff, really. And so this is the layout for our sessions. So we kind of have the first 4 sessions, basically in short form, are going to be making websites and making them look cool, essentially. So what does it look like to build out a website? How do you make it look cool? How does it like interact and do that sort of stuff? All that's going to be the first 4 sessions. The last 4 sessions are going to be how do you actually take that website that you built now? How do you get it up on a domain, or how do you distribute it to people? And how do you do some of the other stuff that we would use to build out like fancier apps, like for example, like Google search, where you can like search and there's a big database of a bunch of information. How do you build that sort of stuff is going to be what the last 4 sessions are about. And for the first few sessions, it's actually not going to be me that's going to be teaching. It's actually going to be Isaac. So I guess I'll get him if you can want to unmute and introduce yourself, Isaac.
Sure, yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Isaac. I'm going to be covering the first few sessions, and then also I'm going to be taking one of the second half sessions. Um, yeah, I'm in software engineering, and I have some experience with these, and I'm excited to be teaching you guys. I'll throw it back to you, Kieran.
Perfect. It just occurred to me that I actually didn't introduce myself either. So I'm Kieran. I'm in computer science, and I've also run a web development company, and I've done a lot of work at the university for developing out their websites as well. So just as a background for me as well, I'll be mostly teaching the last 4 sessions, and yeah, we'll go over there. And so yeah, this sort of just describes what I just explained. Um, and so one of the things that we want to also focus on for these sessions is that we don't just want to give you like, hey, here's like the sort of the recipe to follow for everything. What we want to give you is we want to give you like, here's a recipe you can follow, but here's the ways you can change it to make it easier for you to do what you're trying to do. So we want to give you the tools to be able to adapt to the workflows that we're teaching you so that you can actually use them for things that you want. It's going to be helpful for you guys when you're actually building out websites, because a lot of the times the cookie cutter sort of here, follow these exact steps, don't actually work very well for everything. So there'll be a lot of that sort of stuff, and we'll be talking about different ways of doing what we described, essentially. We'll also be covering different aspects of web development. So for the game sessions or the intermediate sessions, if you took those, we did a lot of game development stuff, and we focused on like the physics and everything about how to build out a game. But we didn't really cover a lot of the stuff like, the design and anything like that really for a lot of the game sessions. For these sessions, what we're going to cover is we're going to cover everything about the technical aspects, but also things like how do you design a site that doesn't look awful, things that people actually want to use? How do you build out content and stuff that actually looks good and is easy to read? So we're going to talk about that, as well as like security principles, because this is a website, so people might try and hack into it. And we're going to be able to have you answer questions like, the right-hand side of this is actually easier to read than the left-hand side, even though there's more text. So there's actually about 25% more text on the right-hand side, but it's much easier to read than the left. So why is that the case? Why does that actually work? Why can people scan this information much more easily than they can on the left-hand side? Or things like, how do I turn a site like this into something that looks like this, right? So just basic design things that make it a little bit nicer for people to read your sites and actually want to read your sites, or something like this. So for example, like by the end of session 3, we'll have something like this where it's mobile responsive. So you can have it on like your phone or on your laptop or whatever you want. Session 4, this has actually changed a little bit, but things like being able to filter, being able to do fancy interactions on the page. And by the last session, you'll have an idea of how to build something like this, where we have an API that's now connecting to a database somewhere else and pulling information about Pokemon dynamically. So, one thing about the slides, some people will look at the slides and they'll see that there's a ton of slides and they get a little bit intimidated. The slides themselves, there's a whole bunch of them that are actually not meant to be read at that time. So namely, what you'll see is there'll be like green slides. Those green slides are basically links to other pages. So there'll be things like, here, if you want to learn more, you can click on this to go somewhere else and read something else about it, right? So they're not designed to be set up where you're going to read the whole thing. They are designed so that you can go back and read them later if you want. So you should be able to go back and be able to read stuff and still understand kind of what's going on. So don't worry about trying to read everything. Focus on what's being said more than what's on the slides. Because if you try and focus on reading the entire slides, you're gonna get lost. So yeah, so any slides that have this, the green bar across the top, they're basically resource slides. And mostly what they're for is things like, let's say, for example, we're talking about, some sort of design thing, and maybe there's some library that you can download from somewhere else that will let you do this really well. We might have a link to that library in there, as well as a description about what the library does. Those sorts of things aren't really important for you to like actually read over. They're just mostly there for you if you want to go back and you're like, hey, that was kind of interesting what we talked about before. You can go back, click on those things, and you have a bunch of links to other places to go check out stuff. There's a couple of other types of slides that you'll see that'll be color coded. So quick questions will basically be some multiple choice questions that you'll have some time to answer. Exercises will be where we actually do some coding. And then the purple ones at the end will be the end of session exercises. These will be optional, and I'll explain them a little bit later, but these will be kind of the more interesting sort of challenges that we have. So essentially the end of session exercises are going to be they're going to give you 3 levels of difficulty, and what they'll let you do is you'll get something that you might see in the real world, and you'll get some real content with it. So you might get like a fake company, and it might have like their fake branding and all their fake information, and you'll be able to go out and build a website for that fake company, and then you'll be able to submit it for what's called Ignite points, which I'll explain in a later slides. But essentially they'll be kind of like these are kind of like marked, but they're not real. Like they basically just have to meet the requirements they're asked for in each level of difficulty. So they're not really don't be expecting us to like give you a hard marking or anything like that. Basically, it's going to be check off the box. Did you do this thing? Yes, cool, good. Does it work? Yes, that's really it. So don't be too scared about that. But yeah, essentially these are going to be more of like what you might find in the real world, essentially. And so with that, we'll talk about Ignite points. So Ignite points, if you haven't done anything with Ignite before, is basically a system that we have where you collect points, and then at the end of the sessions, you can win prizes. So there's like gift cards and a bunch of other stuff that you can win at the end of the sessions if you have a bunch of Ignite points. So you can collect them through consistent attendance. So basically, as you go, if you show up each time, you'll get more and more points the more frequently you show up and the more consistently you show up, essentially. Answering those quick questions, so that's the multiple choice questions that we talked about before, and the end of session exercises. Those are kind of the 3 main ways that you're going to be able to get points in the sessions. And so with that, basically the top 3 students will get an Amazon gift card, and then we'll kind of decide what the amount is. But you'll get an Amazon gift card basically to spend on whatever you want. And so the big thing that I would say is that the streak score, so this is basically like if you come each week consistently, you get more points the more you consistently show up. So for example, let's say for the first session you attend, you get 5 points, and then each consecutive session you get 5 more points. So if you attend session 1 and session 2, you would get session 1, you get 5 points, session 2, you get 10 points. And then session 3, you get 15, etc., 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 right? So just as an example in here, so we have somebody who showed up for session 1, session 2, session 3, and then they got to 15, and then they kept doing it until session 5, which gives them 25 points for just showing up for session 5. But then they skipped session 6, so then session 6 they got 0, 7 they got 5, 10. So it's like a streak basically for each time that you show up. So we highly recommend showing up consistently because it's actually a lot of points that you get for doing this. So I'd highly recommend it. Quick questions. So these will be the multiple choice questions. They're basically worth 10 to 20 points each, and they will give you access to Top Hat, and that will be how you'll be able to get like actually answer those questions. And yeah, again, so it's super important for you to contribute when you're in the sessions. You don't have to participate if you don't want to, but I'd highly recommend it because free Amazon money is good. Okay. I'm gonna actually quickly send off these slides really quickly in the chat. Just like that. Should have done that at the start of the session. And so there is the web page version available for you to go into Top Hat, or there is the course code available for you here. And so you want to create your account, make sure you use the correct email. This is the big thing. Make sure you have the same email and make sure you use the same first and last name that you use on Zoom. The reason this is important is because when we're marking stuff and we're giving you points for it, if your name is wrong or if your email is wrong, we have no idea who you are. We can't give you points. So just make sure you do that correctly. Okay, and then yeah, for the end of session exercises, so you can see here, there's basically 3 levels. The first level, if you complete that first level, it'll give you 15 points. Second level will give you 25, and the third level will give you 35. Some challenges will require you to do them all, so you have to do level 1, 2, and 3. Some of them will only require you to do like, the first one might require you to only do level 2, for example, or level 3, just to get that amount of points from there. These don't stack, so it only goes to the highest level that you complete. So if you complete level 3, for example, you get 35 points total. You don't get all of these points added up together. So if you complete level 2, you get 25 points. If you complete level 1, you get 15 points. Just to make that clear. Okay. And with that, we have our website, which I'll talk in chat as well. And usual sessions, what you'll find is that if you come up here into the top left and come into sessions and then Scorch, there will usually be some things that'll pop up here that will tell you what we're doing for the day. So it'll tell you some information about the session that we're covering today, and it'll have the link to the slides, which is the most important thing. So make sure that you can know how to get to the website because you'll need that for the slides, and they'll always have the link available for you on there. Likewise, there is a Discord, which I'll copy a link as well. This is a great place if you have any questions or if you want to show off any projects that you've made, or you also have a dedicated channel for your group. So if you join the Discord, then you'll be able to ask your mentor questions if you have some about specific exercises or about any of the like if you at the end of the sessions we'll have like a project that you can do if you want, and you can also ask questions about that in there as well. We'll cover this again in session 1, just because a lot of people skip session 0. So we'll cover this again in session 1 and about how to do all this stuff. So don't worry about this for now. We'll deal with this later. There will also be a gala at the end of the 8 weeks. So once we finish kind of everything up, we got everything all sorted and done, there'll be a gala. And what that is basically we have a bunch of engineers who come in from like Google, AMD, Microsoft, whatever, all these sorts of places. And they'll come in and do sort of talks about different things. They'll talk about, getting a job at those companies. They'll talk about the stuff they're currently working on, all that sort of thing. It's a great opportunity to meet some people who are really interesting, as well as be able to meet your mentors and everything like that. So there's also free food, super handy. And you also have a choice if you want to be able to show off a project that you make at the end of this. So if you finish off the end of the 8 week sessions and you want to show off some sort of project that you built to do with web development, then you get a chance to do that here, and then you can show that off to everybody, and you get Ignite points for doing so as well. So you get a ton of Ignite points for doing it, which then again also gives you free money for Amazon. Super handy. Okay, so what we're going to do now is going to get you all set up for the sessions. So the first thing is you'll need some sort of Chromium-based browser. So the easiest one to download is going to be Chrome. So if you don't have Chrome, make sure you download it. If you use Firefox or Safari, most of the stuff that we'll show you will work, but the stuff that won't work, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to find the solutions to your problems like on the fly. So if you're using Firefox and for some reason, this particular thing isn't working when you're running it, we might not have time to be able to figure out what's going on, and you might just be stuck not being able to complete the exercise for the time being. So just keep that in mind. If you do use the other browsers, that you might run into those problems. Microsoft Edge will also work. That's what I'm going to be using. So you can see here, I'm on Microsoft Edge. So if you have that installed, if you're on Windows, then you're good to go. If not, then you want to make sure to install Chrome and go from there. Python. You will need Python 3. And so the slides actually have links down here to different guides about how to set up your Python environment. You'll need at least version of 3.7 plus. So if you've already installed Python, if you go into your command line and you type in Python, so in here, if this number isn't bigger than 3.7, you'll need to install an updated version of Python because your version is too old. So just keep that in mind. You'll also need pip for Python. So if you go through and do these installation steps, you'll notice that in here, if I go ahead and I type in pip and hit enter, I get this whole command thing that shows up here. If you're on macOS, it's going to be pip3 is usually what you're going to have to type in, and then you get this whole thing that shows up here. If you don't have that, you'll have to get that set up. And so basically, it should be as easy for most of you as just going to this link here, which is python.org/downloads. Just hit the latest version of Python and then just install it. If you are on Windows, so if I go ahead and click this and then I open this, if you're on Windows, make sure to click this thing off where it says add python.exe to path. Otherwise, none of it will work when you're trying to run it. Just make sure you check that box off when you do it to install. Also, do not install through the Windows Store. You'll run into a bunch of problems. So if it asks you to set it up through the Microsoft Store, don't do that, because if you do, it'll have a whole bunch of problems. So just make sure you install it through here. Okay. So once we have Python and we have a browser set up, we'll have EasyCV. So a good way to test if your Python installation is working is by typing pip install EasyCV. And that'll go through and it'll do a whole bunch of things. So I already have it installed. It's going to go through and finish it off for me really quickly. But this is basically going to be something that we're going to be using towards the end of the sessions. So we'll need that as well. You're fine if you already have an older version of Python. Then that's fine. For the top hat question, when we go into, so we're going to go into breakout rooms. So if you guys do run into any problems with doing any of this, by the way, we'll be able to help you in the breakout rooms. But for the top hat question, I'll get somebody in the breakout room to help you with that, just because I'm not sure. Okay, and then yeah, 3.8 is fine. Just basically, as long as you can do pip install EasyCV and it works, you should be fine. Essentially, that's good enough for you. If pip install doesn't work, what you can also do is you can do Python. So I'll type this in chat as well, but -m pip install EasyCV. So if Python works for you, but pip for some reason isn't working for you, you can also try this command. And that'll do the exact same thing. Okay. So once we have a browser, we've got Python, we have EasyCV set up. then what we can do here is we're going to set up a editor. So we're going to use something to edit some text so that we can actually create some Python files. And for that, we're going to use Visual Studio Code. So this would be what I'd highly recommend. You can use other editors, but some of the features won't be available to you if you use other editors. So just keep that in mind as you go. Like some of the plugins that we'll be using won't be available to you if you're using a different editor. So if you don't mind dealing with that, that's fine. But if you do want to use everything that we're using, you're going to need to get Visual Studio Code. So that's the link for it down there. Basically, you can just download it and install it. There's no special fancy anything you need to do. Yep. And then once you actually have it installed, the thing that you're going to need to do is if I go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code, and I'll go ahead and grab this, pull it across. So in here, there'll be a section in the bottom left called, or on the left-hand side called extensions. If I go ahead and hit extensions, and then in here, what you're going to want to do is just type in Python. And there's two different options you can install. So you can install the main Python option here from Microsoft, or the one that I tend to like doing is the Python extension pack by Don Jimene. And if you install this, this includes a whole bunch of extra things that we'll also be able to use as well. So I would highly recommend installing this extension pack if you want it. I believe there's a way on here for me to actually grab, I think I can grab the URL. Yep. So I just posted the link in chat to the URL as well. So if you want to run that and just install that, then that would be good as well. Okay. So I guess we'll go through and I'll show you VS Code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pop open a quick folder. And inside this folder, I'm just going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. So if you want to be able to do that same thing that I just did in there without having to do any of this, what you can also do is you can just open Visual Studio Code. And then once it's open, you can go ahead and you can hit open folder and then go and find the folder itself and open it that way. But for me, I have my folder open in here. And once we're in here, there's basically a couple things that you can do. So at the top here, there's going to be a bunch of buttons. So there's going to be new folder, new file, and then there's some of this stuff as well we don't have to worry about. But let's say, for example, that we want to create a new file. We just go ahead and hit this, and then we say our test.py, for example. And that's going to give us a Python file that we can go ahead and type some stuff into if we wanted to. If you want to create folders, you can create them in here as well, just by doing that, and then just folder. And then if you want, you can drag stuff in there. So super easy, super simple to go. Super easy to use. And this is what we're going to be using for a lot of stuff whenever we're trying to actually open stuff up. If you are on Windows and you need to open up a folder that we have, then what you can also do on here, hold on, let me just quickly find that. There we go. So on here, what we can do is the thing that I was doing before is if I click in here and I go ahead and type in CMD and then hit enter, I now get this thing that says new folder. It basically opens up a command line in here. If I want to open up the folder itself, I can do code and then hit dot, and that'll open it up as well. On macOS, you should be able to right click and there should be an option to open terminal here. And that'll do the same thing essentially. And that'll basically let you open up this editor in there. Okay. So, yeah, basically, if you want to save any of your changes, just Control S, Command S, same thing as what you'd find on like Microsoft Word. And .py files are what we're going to be using for Python. Yeah, this is basically the VS Code thing that I was talking about before. There's some fancy VS Code stuff that only exists in VS Code. So I would recommend just making sure that you're using VS Code so that you can do all this. As you can see here, I just type in like a quick command, and then whenever I hit enter, it just automatically basically fills a bunch of stuff for me. So I would recommend having VS Code just to be able to do that. Okay. What I'm going to do actually is right now, I'm going to give 2 or 3 minutes just to have a breakout room, just so that we can get everything set up because we're going through some of these steps kind of quickly. So I'm just going to give a couple of minutes for people to troubleshoot in breakout rooms so that we have a chance. Okay, perfect. So hopefully some of the issues we're able to get sorted out. We'll be going back into breakout rooms as well after this. I just wanted to give you guys a chance to do it sort of midway through, just because we have a lot of extra time. So once we now have our editor, ready to go so we can make files. We have Python so we can run files, and we have a browser so that we can run our sort of web files as well. So now what we're going to look at is how we actually get some of the information from our side. So how do you get the information from us? So there is a service called GitHub. And if you're interested, there is a video that we made that talks a little bit more about what GitHub and GitHub is. So if you want to know more about it, you can. You don't actually need to know how it works at all. But the main thing that you will need is going to be an account. So there'll be this link here, which I'll check in the chat. And essentially what you're going to want to do is sign up for a GitHub account. And then there'll be a code that gets sent to your email, and then you'll have to use that to set up your account fully. Once your account's actually set up, it'll look something vaguely like this. So if I go ahead and I head to github.com, for example, and then I were to go to my profile, mine looks like this because I've already customized it and done a whole bunch of stuff, but yours will look something like this where you should have your name as well as like whatever username you chose. Please, before you sign up, if you're in the middle of signing up, please heed this warning. Your username will show up in URLs. So any sites that you create, your username will show up. Do not make the mistake of putting something on there that you don't want other people to read. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes what's funny isn't the best thing to put in as your username, just a heads up. Okay. And so once you kind of have your account set up, you can actually do this about the account if you don't want to. So you can actually grab this right now. But there is a link. I'll just cut stuff off. There we go. I'll put that link in there. What this is basically going to be our page where we have all the code for the sessions. So you can see here we have all the different days, and inside it, they'll have all the exercises and the different examples, as well as some information about the sessions as well. So what you can do here is when you get to this page, all you do is you go ahead and hit code, and then you can go ahead and hit download zip, and that will download a zip file. So if you go ahead and download that, I'll just let that download in the background while that's going. If you have never opened a zip file before, essentially all you do is you double click it, kind of like a folder. Once it finishes downloading. There we go. So if you double click it and open it, it'll open up and it'll look something like this. If you're opening it on Windows, it'll open up in the main Windows editor. I have a different program that I use here called 7-Zip that I use to do this, but it doesn't really matter. All you're going to want to do is just basically grab this folder that exists here and just drag this somewhere that you can get access to it. So it doesn't really matter. I'm going to drag it onto my desktop, for example. And then if I pop it open, you'll see here I have the exact same files and folders inside here. So if I go ahead and go back to here, you can see we have day 0, day all of that, and we can see we have the exact same thing in here as well. So basically, the long and short, if you are interested, is that GitHub is kind of similar to like what you can imagine a Google Drive, except for it's set up for code, and there's some fancy other features that it has. So we have all of our code that we're going to need inside here, and you'll know if you did all this right, because if you go inside day 0, there'll be one that says exercises, and you should be able to open up this file here. So if I go ahead and drag it into my browser, for example, we can see here it says welcome to the course. So if you download it and you get everything set up properly, you should be able to see this. So yeah, so extract the files, and then go ahead and check today's files and make sure that you're able to open this up in some way. And the only other type of files that you're going to run into on here are going to be markdown files. So if I go ahead and I grab that, and no, that's my new folder. Where was the one I just had? There we go. So inside this day 0, for example, if I go ahead and I were to open up code again, same way that I was doing it before. So if I go ahead and pop open this folder, if I'm looking at something like this, kind of looks a little bit weird on here. What you can actually do inside VS Code is anything that has this .md extension, you click inside of it and you can press Control-Shift-V or Command-Shift-V on a Mac, and that will open up the preview like this. This is basically just a format called Markdown that we'll talk about a little bit later on that just basically makes it easy for you to create documents like this that look kind of cool. And so that's what we'll be using for quite a few things. And you'll notice it's used quite a bit on GitHub and a bunch of other places. So you can see this whole document that we're reading right here and how it looks, that's all Markdown as well. So if we were to click on Markdown and then click on Raw, we can actually see exactly what that looks like in here. So we just need to make sure that we can preview it in something that's easy to edit Markdown files with. Okay. So now we're going to do a breakout room and just get you guys to download that stuff and get it all set up again. On top of that, we're also going to give you guys a little bit extra time so that you can go ahead and you can get to know your mentors a little bit better and play some games. It seems like a couple of the mentors weren't able to show up today, so you'll be meeting a mentor, but it might not necessarily be the same mentor that you have next time. Um, so there'll be an introductory activity that you can choose from. You can ask any questions that you have. It can be about programming, or it can be about university if you're in high school still, or about whatever you want. And then you can also play some games if you want. And so the introductory exercise is going to be for each person in the room. What's your name? What's your favorite smell? And something about programming that interests you. So there's also some games that you can play um, if you really want to. But yeah, if you have everything all set up, the main thing to keep in mind is that just make sure you have the Discord. So we sent you the link in there. And then it'll be every from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Every Friday from here on out for the sessions. So we'll go ahead and do the breakout rooms, and you guys can get a chance to troubleshoot and do all that stuff.